It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Blaugust, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 215. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi.
We're down some people, because reason. Gen Con and other stuff going on. So, it's officially August now, which means it is Blaugust time. And this year, I kind of remixed it with a bunch of the other events that had fallen by the wayside, and so far, it seems to be getting a positive response? Question mark?
Hooray.
We are up to 88 blogs participating, and that ties, I think, 2015, which was the highest participating year. And if things go at all like that year went, like, people will show up midstream, especially since we're not as sold on the whole do 31 posts thing. There's like a Discord that is like crazy active with a bunch of bloggers, and a bunch of people signed up as mentors. And I don't know if we're doing anything useful as mentors, but the pre-week thing seemed to work out pretty well, because it was a lot of the more technical and getting started kind of posts, with the thought that, like, by the time August 1st rolled around, people could actually have an active blog running. And there were several new ones that sprung up during that time. So if you are at all interested, you should totally check it out. Because if you go to aggronaut.com, there's a Blaugust link in the sidebar, and that's probably the fastest way you can get to the information. Or just check out the Blaugust Reborn hashtag on Twitter, and there's tons of posts showing up there every day. There are other more technical resources, like someone has built an OPML file so you can import all the blogs into your RSS feed reader. Someone else is maintaining like a Twitter feed of all the people that are participating, and I've got like a spreadsheet that has like all the names of the blogs and such. But probably the fastest way to connect to those resources is through the link I mentioned before. I think Ash is even going to participate.
Started participating.
I have been crazy busy and have had hell trying to keep up with everything. I am a bad leader of Blaugust so far.
It also might be the case that Dean has betrayed me and ate my first post, but hey, whatever.
Well, I mean, you did switch providers at some point in there, didn't you?
I did on July 31st, so yeah, bad idea.
The day before you got billed. Anyway, Tam, last week we talked a lot about World of Warcraft, and I believe you commented about how all of it basically ties back to Warcraft 3. And now apparently you're playing Warcraft 3.
Yeah, I wasn't around last week, and I listened to the show, and it, like, I don't know, I listened to the show and then watched all of this stuff, and it kind of bummed me out. Because my memory is that there was, like, Warcraft had good storytelling once upon a time, and there's a bunch of people who are like really excited about what's going on with the story, because they're like, it's getting people to talk, and that's good. But like, I don't know, I agree.
I mean, that sounds like that there's no such thing as bad publicity thing,
which is also false.
Yep.
So here's my thought about Warcraft and its story, and hopefully Thalen can add additional words in here, because I'm not exactly sure how to explain what I'm gonna say, but World of Warcraft's story was like good for 90s era comic book boom comic book stories, like Image Comics early days stories, which were really not great stories in the first place.
No, they weren't.
But they were
really
very
weren't.
much like Warcraft's story has always kind of been the Rob Liefeld of video game storytelling.
Oh, come on.
I mean, it has moments, but it's it's very like big explosions and booms and very rough ideas, but not a lot of nuance.
Yeah, there's a story there, and it's really cool and exciting while you're experiencing in it. But don't stop and think about it too much, or poke at it, or it'll fall apart.
It kind of reminds me of like what we've talked about before with Warhammer 40K. Is Warhammer 40K is a storyline that has some interesting stuff going on prior to the reboot, but it is best thought of if you think of it as a parody.
Yeah.
Whereas Warcraft story, there are things that I like about it, but I feel like it missed the memo somewhere that it probably should have thought of itself as a parody.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I'm
think
noticing.
It had to be.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm at with, like, I'm replaying the Warcraft 3, like I was saying, I'm replaying the Warcraft 3 story, and like the voice acting is terrible. Like and
bad.
It's super bad, and it was good for the time, but it's super bad. And I feel like it's one of those, I feel like that's a good way to think about it and remember that, like, oh, Warcraft has always been cheesy, but the actual story being told is not all big explosions and like fluff. I mean, you're like, there's world building, there's like place name, you get place names introduced to you and then have them explain the context. Like they bring up Anderhall pretty early on, and like, why does Anderhall matter? Oh, because it's the central shipping point for all of the food in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's an interesting, like, they're talking about, it's an interesting piece of world building. It's an interesting, like, how does Lordaeron get its food? How does this all come together? What are the relationships between the humans and the elves? It's light, but it's played seriously. You get an idea of what's going on in this setting and in this world that I feel like is missing later. Like, you get a sense that Arthas and Jaina are friends, or possibly more at some level. You get the idea you get the idea that there's some amount of arrogance in Dalaran. It uses the hints that you get. I mean, the different pieces of the disparate pieces of the story tie together, because it's like, oh, okay, this prophet shows up and, you know, helps Thrall get all of his people out. And then you see that same prophet trying to warn Dalaran, and the fact that you know that the prophet is presumably right-ish is relevant, because when you see him in Dalaran, it helps characterize Dalaran. And it was one of the, you know, it's one of the first Blizzard sort of injected stories into, you know, RTSs in a big way, and it's a coherent story.
Yeah.
And I think what bugs me about it is that I'm not sure at which point it moved to being a parody, because there's still jokes and there's still humor, but like you can take the world seriously.
I feel like the real problem that World of Warcraft had is that, like you said, Warcraft 3 actually did have, you know, a pretty good story, especially for the time, with those interesting, like, bits of world building. And I feel like World of Warcraft coasted on that, like, and continues, like, they'll try and branch off into something else a little bit and introduce new characters and stuff, but they never last beyond a single expansion pack, it doesn't seem like.
Well, to be fair, none of their ideas last beyond a single expansion pack anymore.
Yeah.
Like, if they put a system in, like, it ain't gonna last more than that one expansion.
But so it always comes back to, it seems like it always comes back to what was cool in the original Warcraft, in Warcraft 3. And I don't know, I feel like I have yet to see a strong story beat, really powerful story beat, that didn't directly harken back to Warcraft 3. And then this latest stuff, you know, it's the same. I mean, okay, Jaina's listening to her dad. Well, that's from the founding of Durotar. You know, apparently, I guess the Sylvanas video is out, and, you know, shows some stuff about her that it sounds like is, you know, straight out of Warcraft 3. So I don't know.
Side note, we didn't get a special cinematic, that's the cinematic we get. Like in game, when you're actually playing through the quest, it's a handful of busy work missions, and then that cinematic with no more real explanation.
Like I feel like maybe it's about time that they wrapped up. I feel like they should have that Legion, like the defeat of Sargeras, should have wrapped up things harkening back to Warcraft 3, and they should be doing. And I don't know. And maybe that's their intention. Is maybe this is going to be their way of getting rid of everything left from Warcraft 3 by turning them into raid bosses and having them be murdered.
But I also feel like the thing is I remember from vanilla story beats that were interesting and cool that didn't harken back to Warcraft 3.
And there were.
I mean, the Defias Brotherhood was amazing.
Defias Brotherhood, Onyxia.
Yeah, the whole Bolvar and Onyxia and all of that.
That was a great. Those were
mad until they decided to wrap that up in comics.
Yep.
Yeah. The Missing Diplomat was a great quest line. And there were similar. There was quite a lot of similar stuff on the Horde side.
There's much less of it.
Much less of it, but
yeah, it seems like they tried to have that stuff in there in vanilla and just kind of ignored it moving forward.
I mean, from TBC onwards, though, it's felt like we're drawing deeply upon things that happened in Warcraft 3.
Yeah, and I assume it's a case of this is the cool stuff that the fans remember, so we should, do stories about it. But
I'm not even sure that the fans remember it.
It's not nowadays. I doubt it.
I mean,
that game is 20 years old.
Yeah, like significant portion of your WoW players like never played Warcraft 3, but it's got this legendary status. So it's not about having played it, it's about knowing about it. In the same way that, like, I don't know, I never saw Star Wars because I wasn't alive.
Still.
The what?
It's only 15 years old still. Like college students playing World of Warcraft now were, little preschoolers when it came out. So yeah.
Right.
I mean, that was pretty heavy rotation in the preschool circuit.
You gotta start esports stars young. But I don't know. I feel like I would have preferred that they leaned more heavily on things like Bolvar and the Defias and things like that, and made those like the primary storylines. Like followed that stuff into something truly new, rather than continually going back to the characters and the plots we've already seen.
Yeah. It's like there's just a few too many seasons of this show without anything interesting or new happening.
But I mean, yeah, if they kill everybody from Warcraft 3, if they're all dead, I mean, they can't do any more stories with them. So
there's always Thrall.
There will always be Thrall.
I mean, I keep thinking of ways that they could spin this interestingly, but then not having the faith that that's actually going to happen or anything vaguely close to it's going to happen. I mean, my theory, like the thing that I would love to see is for both factions to go just completely nuts and have a splinter group off of each break off, and that becomes the new core of the game, and no faction wall between them, so that you have the reasonable leaders of both sides basically forming a new thing.
I mean, I feel like there's a really interesting way to change the shape of WoW. I just don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of ways.
Too risky.
I think there's a bunch of ways they could do it. I just don't think. I think it's half they don't really know how, and half they're not interested in doing that. Like,
it's too easy to sell Horde and Alliance merchandise currently.
Kinda, yeah.
I mean, once something is like the big popular cash cow, it becomes really risky to. I mean, it becomes difficult to take risks with it.
But the thing is it's no longer their cash cow.
No, it's not, and like I wonder if they've truly like realized that.
I have a feeling that like it will be painfully obvious that that's the case at BlizzCon this year, because most of the games that are making them money are not Warcraft. I mean, they're making a decent amount of money off of Heroes of the Storm, quite a bit off Hearthstone. From what I understand, a lot.
Understatement on Hearthstone.
Right. Yeah. They're doing well with Hearthstone.
Mm-hmm.
They're also doing really well with Overwatch.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, it is rapidly arrived at a place where, like, the two games that I care about the most from Blizzard, World of Warcraft and Diablo 3, are, like, kind of low on the totem pole.
Yeah, which might mean that I'd actually, be willing to take some risks with it and do something new and different. I'm going to draw a comparison to comic books. Bell, you brought them up first, though.
Yes, I did.
But because comic books are one of the things I always go back to, but it makes me think of the X-Men comics and how for the longest time in the 70s and 80s, X-Men was where, like, long soap opera stories with all sorts of crazy things happening was going on, new and interesting stuff, characters, leaving the team, meant to leave permanently.
Right.
Like, Claremont always intended for the original X-Men to grow up and move on and new members to join the team. But the problem was it was so good that it became more and more popular, and then the 90s hit and it became the biggest thing ever.
Yeah, the Jim Lee era.
Yeah. And so suddenly Marvel didn't want to have things change. They didn't want to take risks with it. They basically wanted it to go back to, like, what they felt like was the best X-Men. And it's pretty quickly turned into just the same characters doing the same stuff over and over with not a lot of change. And kind of stayed that way for a while.
And you gotta change.
It became, yeah. And after a while, once people got over that initial, like, oh, the art and everything is so amazing, and especially when comics just, went to crap in the 90s anyway, and everything fell apart, like, sales went down, and it was no longer the biggest thing, and, risks could be taken again for a while.
Man, and there were so many really cool storylines during the era of low profitability, like the whole Storm and the Morlocks. That never would have happened if it were a popular comic.
No,
like that was way too long of a payoff, but it was so cool. And I mean, there for a while, like, you completely replaced all of the characters with all these weird Morlocks that you had never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me think of, like, Final Fantasy XIV, for example, and I don't really want to say ESO because it's not really true of ESO, but Final Fantasy XIV is, like, the second, has spent a lot of time in WoW's shadow as the second place MMO, and it did a bunch of interesting stuff in that space because it had to innovate.
Yep. Yeah, not being at the top, it not only means you have room to innovate and take some risks, it kind of means that you have to.
And I get that, like, I mean, it's like the thing that Bell says, is they never want stories to end, and I get it, but, like, eventually you run out of story, and I think Warcraft is there.
Well, I think the problem for me is, like, I've never played Warcraft 3 through in its entirety. I've played bits and pieces of it, but by the time it came out, I just didn't really care about RTS games, so I never played it. Like, I was playing other things at the time. I think mostly EverQuest and DAOC. So I was not in that mindset. So I don't have the Warcraft story was never really on a pedestal for me, like the original Warcraft story. I mean, I used to say this thing, like, when World of Warcraft first came out, I was like, I did not understand how they were going to make an MMO out of this game, when in my mind most Blizzard games only had enough storyline to keep the game from just completely falling on its face. I mean, the original Diablo story is not the most complicated of stories. And Orcs vs. Humans wasn't that amazing of a story either.
It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
I mean, it alluded to a lot of things, but never actually told you much of anything. So when I found out they were doing an MMO, like, I was kind of shocked. Like, I didn't think there was enough story to draw on, but that was having not really spent much time in Warcraft 3.
And I'm actually kind of curious. My hope is that I can play through all of War 3 and the Frozen Throne, because I'm curious. I've heard people make the argument that the storytelling fell apart with WoW, and I'm curious if that's true. My inclination is not to believe that.
Yeah, I don't really think that's the case. Like, I think Vanilla WoW, like, picked up the ball and ran fairly well with it from Frozen Throne.
Yeah.
And the problems arose really with the Burning Crusade and moving forward, when
and
they realized how huge this thing was that they had.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, I've ranted about Burning Crusade as the point at which I kind of checked out. Um, but I wonder I wonder what lessons can be learned.
Well, so I feel like actually what happened is Burning Crusade was their way of wrapping up the Outland story involving Illidan.
Oh yeah.
And Wrath of the Lich King was their way of wrapping up all the story beats from Frozen Throne.
Frozen Throne, yeah.
And then you had Cataclysm that kind of
Cataclysm
fell
is where
flat.
I checked out.
Right, like
Yeah.
it fell flat. It wasn't really good. So
And there's
think
that too, I guess.
I think that was the point at which they lost their confidence, maybe?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think because Cataclysm was the point where they actually did try to do some new stuff, and they had like some new areas and new characters, and it didn't really like it. It tied into Deathwing, obviously, but he was from Warcraft 2 and hadn't been seen since then. And it didn't do as well as they hoped. So yeah, that could be.
I think the biggest problem with Cataclysm though is they were way too ambitious and then simply ran out of time. Because the whole, we're going to redo the entire world and try and tell some kind of a cohesive storyline, I don't think there was ever a point at which they were going to succeed at that. Not and keep any kind of a reasonable expansion cadence. Like, if they had 4 years, 5 years to build that thing, they maybe could have pulled it off, but...
Where did it do?
I mean, I feel like had they not rebuilt the world, maybe they could have woven a decent story through it and not kept it to just 5 levels and 5 completely disconnected zones that didn't really have much of a story weaving between them.
We've also talked in the past about how rebuilding the world was mostly probably a mistake because it meant paving over a lot of things that worked pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the things that I wonder, and I mean, it's slightly more than an idle business case thought, but like, should Cataclysm have been WoW 2?
I mean, I feel like probably it should have. That it should have been what EverQuest 2 was to EverQuest.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
that's
that's
not a good business case to be following.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying like it could have done that right. Like, what needed to have happened was something, the wrath of Deathwing go across the world, and then some time to have passed and pick up the pieces of the shattered world, and new factions arise, new kingdoms. What made EverQuest 2 not work was the fact that they literally shattered the world. Like, they chopped it up into little islands that felt nothing like the previous ones. There wasn't enough recognizable material from EverQuest and EverQuest 2, at least not at launch.
Yeah. Wow, it just occurred to me that someone should have pointed Games Workshop at EverQuest 2 and said, see, that's what not to do.
But, like, I feel like it could have been done, and could have been done interestingly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at Final Fantasy XIV. I mean,
like,
that's what happened there. Not to the extent of, like, completely wrecking the world, but, things got blown up, time passed.
I mean, the canon could have been that the Defias rose to take over Stormwind, and now you have a Freeport-esque town run by rogue.
There's a ton of interesting stuff that I think could have been done, but I feel like Cataclysm, we should be seeing Cataclysm like now.
Mm-mm.
Not when it happened. And we should be seeing like now would be the time for Blizzard to be like, hey, things went really badly, or like, hey, hell, they had the time travel expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Have the time travel expansion be the point at which your timelines diverge. WoW, you have WoW this timeline and WoW the other timeline, and give people perks for playing both that cross between them. And there's an interesting way to do. There's interesting ways to do that.
I mean, one of my half-assed predictions is that they're gonna have the players, kill off Jaina and Sylvanas, and then go get new and improved versions out of a different timeline.
Out of the timeline with the Nazi Draenei.
Because if the Draenei are the bad guys there, well, clearly the people who are the bad guys here must be good guys there. That's how it works.
And they have goatees.
Goes. Yeah.
Also, I'm pretty sure my hunter has a goatee.
Also, I hadn't really thought about it until you mentioned, Cataclysm, it being a mistake, the redoing the map. But it occurs to me, a lot of the reason that they decided that they needed to redo the map was to allow flying.
We've already gone over how flying was a mistake.
Yeah, so
many times.
Once more, the true mistake was flight. Should never have happened.
Grace is mad at us and doesn't even know why.
She suddenly got enraged. Someone wrong is on a podcast. I mean, I love the convenience of flight, but it did forever change the world and limit what they could do with it.
Every player loves cheating if they can get away with it.
AKA why leveling with heirlooms feels so much better than leveling without them.
Yup.
Okay, so we spent an entire show last week about this, and we were at risk of spending an entire show this week about this, so we should probably move forward to another topic.
Probably so.
Okay, so I have not followed this hardly at all this week. Tam, someone tell me what the hell Keyforge is, because the little brief I read of it sounded like nonsense.
All right, so cast your mind back to the mid-90s. Mid-90s, early 90s. Richard Garfield made a little game called Magic the Gathering, which quickly spiraled out of his control. Because you remember how we talk about how great it was in Magic to have we just open the packs that we have and we make the decks from those packs, and what you had was what you had, and not really chasing rares to make a set of them for your deck and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was the game that Richard Garfield wanted. And
Yeah.
I get it.
Richard Garfield severely underestimated people's desire to collect things and have
Well,
the best thing.
So a little side note is his vision for Magic never actually went into production. It was apparently his intent for every so often the game to be completely reborn. So when Ice Age came out, it was supposed to be played as a standalone game.
Well, hell, Arabian Nights was originally going to be a standalone game. It was going to be a completely separate with a new card back and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the last moment, I decided, no, we should make it playable with the original cards.
Thereby saving the entire game of Magic.
Yep.
But even when that failed, the intent was that Ice Age and Mirage would be fresh starts. And they would do these fresh starts every so often and essentially negate everything that happened in the past.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
Well, they sort of kind of got there, but
Type
really.
2 was a thing, and then now Standard is the equivalent of Type 2.
Yeah, but it took a while.
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
But yeah. So Richard Garfield has then sat on this thing where he's, probably not sad about it, but definitely the game is not the game he wanted. So now he's trying to make the game that he wanted, which is Keyforge, which is a game probably not dissimilar to Magic. It's a card game in which I don't even know what the conceit is, but you have cards, they do things. Presumably you summon things and those things fight, and maybe you're a wizard. I don't really know the details.
We don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead of colors, there are houses.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
But what happens with this game is that when you buy a deck, those decks have unique card backs. So you can when you buy a deck, that's your deck. You play with that deck, and it's randomized at some level. So you buy a deck, that's your deck that you play with. If you don't like that deck, you buy a new deck, and maybe that deck is better.
I think the more likely result is you stop playing the game.
Or you eBay a deck that sounds like you might want to play it.
Yeah.
Oh god, that's what's actually going to happen. Instead of individual cards going for absurd values, people are going to find the good decks, and those are going to become super expensive.
That's saying this actually
Assuming the game succeeds.
succeeds. Yeah, no, but
Which
it's
it won't.
not.
Oh.
I mean, I
Richard
remember a
Garfield
certain game
desperately-
called The Spoils that was really hot for like about a year, and then no one's heard of it since.
Yeah, Richard Garfield desperately wants to create the game that he was envisioning, and he wants to create a game that can't be Mr. Suitcased,
Right.
This is not that thing.
and it can't happen.
I mean, it would be great if someone made opaque card backs to where your card back doesn't matter for shit.
Yeah,
I can mention that one.
Yep. And then somebody house rules some deck building rules that become the de facto rules for the game.
like I could maybe see a way that something like this could work in a digital format.
Right, exactly. Like,
I do not see a physical game like this working at all.
I mean, okay, so I could see this being really fun if in a digital format you got a randomized deck, and by playing you got some kind of a currency that would let you re-roll your deck, and you could just re-roll it periodically to get to different things. But you could also just buy additional decks that were going to give you a random seed, and I could see something like that being kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It would basically be like every time you play is a sealed tournament.
But even in sealed tournaments, you build your deck.
Right. Yeah.
Like-
And that's part two. Is there's no deck building element. Apparently, you just get a deck.
And like
play with it.
I get the underlying design goal. Because it's the exact same thing that I want out of Magic and can't get. And like
Yeah.
I just know that I can't get I can't get the thing that I want out of Magic. It won't happen. But these are my cards. Cards are exciting. Cards are surprising. We might see a card we've never seen before.
And at first I thought draft would be that thing for me, but draft is something totally different.
No.
Draft is he who knows the expansion the best can draft the best.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas there isn't this like, oh wow, I got a card and people are like, what is that? What? That card does what? That's crazy. I've never even seen that. Like, no. Oh, you got one of those. It's the best card in the set. Good game.
Grats.
Yeah.
You're
grats.
going to win this.
Yeah. And I don't know how to capture that. And I think that that's what Richard Garfield is trying to capture with Keyforge, and I don't think that this is the right way to do it. But I totally understand that excitement from the unknown, where like
I also think that part of the problem is that Magic changed. Like the original Magic cards were not as combo oriented as the later Magic cards have become.
No, they were not.
Mm,
There were combos.
They weren't designed that way, but they
No.
absolutely are.
But
That's-
yeah,
they
someone
weren't
came
designed
up
to
with
be
some
comboed. Yeah.
powerful combos, but like most of the cards were not combo cards. Like there was really the one or two main combos that people were playing. But I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like the original expansions felt like they were designed in a more generalist manner. Like this is a card that does something. Okay,
Something
it's a
just
card that
happens
does
to be
something.
stupidly powerful because we didn't realize how to make things cost properly. So you can play this
Right.
card and two other cards, and now you win the game.
It's true.
Also,
Yeah.
Turbostasis is annoying.
Nobody likes Turbostasis. Letting people playing it.
Like two players playing Turbostasis against each other is kind of like two paladins in World of Warcraft dueling. Like tanky paladins in World of Warcraft dueling. I don't like. I agree with you, Tam, that at some level, Magic the Gathering was just fundamentally not the game he wanted to make.
yeah. And I understand the goal that he wants. I totally get it. I want that too. I lose interest in a game when I lose interest in a game when I realize that it's more important for me to know the metagame than the game itself.
Yes.
And we've talked about like the metagame versus the game before, but I understand that like I just want to play the game. I don't want to have to know every card in the set. I don't want to have to know.
The other side of that coin, though, is that this game is entirely dead to me. I have zero interest in it because I cannot make a deck that is mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I totally agree. That's why I'm 100% with Thalen and Bell on this one, that this is going to fail. Because I see what this is trying to capture, but it's not going to, it's doing other damage in trying to capture this thing.
I feel like on some level I would enjoy it, but on the other level is you are either going to get a winning deck or you're not. Like it's did your $20, I'm gonna assume it's probably going to cost $20 to buy a deck or something in that range, and did you pick a winner? Did you win the random lottery, or did you get something that just isn't that useful? And for me personally, since I love cracking packs, there will be a moment of excitement as I rifle through the new deck that I've never seen, and it will either be followed up by a lot of buyer's remorse or some excitement that I won the lottery.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the same experience that Magic boosters have now, because you know the set. Like if you're playing Magic with any even slight level of competency at this point, you know you have a pretty good idea of what cards are in the set before you buy any packs.
Because of spoiler season.
Yeah.
And the problem is like it doesn't even hold any monetary value. Like in any given set, there will be maybe 8 cards that are over $5. Maybe. And I don't know, like there's just this weird style of set design that Magic has landed on to where there must be a certain percentage of dead cardboard in every single set. Whereas I guess with like the first Magic cards, I feel like there was never the intent that any of those cards were unplayable. Some of them were unexciting.
There were cards that were unplayable. I
played a lot of quote-unquote unplayable cards. Like, I played Lord of the Pit. I loved Lord of the Pit. I did more damage to me than the player did.
Yeah, Demonic Hordes.
But I loved those cards. Like, and sure, they're not the most playable things, but they were fun.
Well, I guess it's not so much that there were completely unplayable cards. There were cards that you would never ever do anything other than put them in your sideboard.
Yeah, like overly corner case cards and but yeah, I mean, if I were trying to capture that same thing that Keyforge is trying to do, I would aggressively pursue every card is playable. This is a card game in which every card is playable. Every card has a place. Every card is balanced. And like that's a crazy huge ask.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's an incredibly difficult problem to solve.
But if you could deliver a card game where there was 0 dead cardboard, like everything had a purpose if you knew what to do with it, that would be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun. Well, and then you could be excited about anything that you pulled in a pack because
it's a card you would enjoy playing rather than it's a card that's mechanically good.
Yeah. If there's a card that you enjoy, you can also play that card, as opposed to a card that you enjoy that you really, really shouldn't.
Yeah,
I feel
because I absolutely ran into that. You know, when I did play Magic, is cards that I just desperately wanted to play because I just liked the concept, but they weren't good cards. Like they just they weren't worth putting into a deck.
Yeah.
Usually, monsters that cost too much.
There were a lot of those originally.
I loved the Urborg troll or whatever, the one that regened. I never played with it because it was too costly, but I liked the concept. It was a big beater that could regen itself.
Yep.
But yeah, and I think that there's an alternate mentality that's like, I want to build decks around the mechanics. Like the theme is the individual card themes is sort of, fluff and flavor. They don't actually have a game effect. I want to be able to like really dive deep into interesting mechanical interactions and build decks around them. And I feel like Magic delivers on that very, very well, mostly. But I don't know. But yeah, I feel like I understand Richard Garfield's frustration, but also this game is not a good idea.
I mean, I feel like if I were trying to build the thing that we're talking about first thing I would do is do away with card rarity.
Well, I mean, rarity, yeah, I mean, it can't really exist in the way that it does now for something like that to work at all. Like card power, sure. Like something along the lines of how drop mix decks work.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a structure where you, rather than rarity, you just like rarity is just a direct correlation to power, but then cards have a cost of putting them in your deck. So like, sure, every booster pack you're going to get one top tier powerful card, but you can't just make a deck out of top tier powerful cards because you'll blow out your deck budget or whatever. But that introduces an entire other like axis on which you've got to balance your cards.
I mean, I feel like you don't even need to balance it based on rarity. You can just balance it based on this card is very powerful but costs a lot of money. Or I mean, not money, like
whatever
the currency is to put it into play. Like, this is going to be very powerful, but it is going to take you a really long time to get this into play. Like, you have to have a lot of ramp to get there.
12-mana dinosaur.
Yes. But then you also have to make sure that the game mechanics themselves are tuned such that those actually get to exist.
Yes.
Because if you have a game,
the game actually needs to last long enough.
Yeah, because it's like if you're
or other mechanisms,
right? If you have a system,
like you have a specific ramp for putting that 12/12 into play.
Yeah, but like if your game is 4 turns long on average, then no, you're never going to get something like that out, much less use it.
I will say one of the things that I like the most about Hearthstone is the fact that there is no land and your resources just progress along a predictable curve. Now, it lends itself to short game because there's a predictable curve and you have early game, mid game, late game. But I do like the fact that you just have spells that you can play. You're not necessarily getting mana screwed the way you can with just a bad draw.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of your resource being separate from the thing you're doing with the resource. Like either with it just being a predictable ramp up the way it is in Hearthstone, or 2 separate decks and you draw from each of them each turn.
Yeah,
so
we talked about
that. Predictable amount of of cards of each sort.
Well, or the L5R version where you're selected, like you have a deck and you select a card that's always in play, or there's in L5R is the card that your opponent is trying to break.
Mm-hmm.
And that dictates your resource income and various other starting things.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I wonder what it would take, like, as just an academic argument, what it would take to balance Magic around having a spell deck or a spell and creature deck and a land deck. And you got to play something from the land deck every turn and then had, say, 5-6 cards in hand from the spell deck.
It would super devalue mana fixing for starters.
Yeah.
You'd have to really think about how you handled card draw, and it would probably make card draw more powerful than it already is, which I'm not sure Magic needs.
Yeah, because you would know that you weren't going to draw a land, and most of the time, once you've got enough land to do your thing, you don't really want any more.
Yeah, it would change your deck construction dramatically. And I think it would open up the game to be a lot more combo focused, because you would have a lot more tight control over what cards you had access to. Because you're
not going to have a round where you don't have anything you can play.
Yeah, like your deck would be your deck, rather than being like, I'm gonna get these ratios.
Roughly a third land.
Yeah, rather than your deck being roughly a third land, you would have like 7 lands in your deck, or 10. You would have like exactly enough to cast your most expensive thing, and then maybe a little bit more for insurance in case your opponent has land destruction. I think it would make land destruction more. I think it would do screwy things to land destruction.
I feel like there's just certain mechanics that maybe just wouldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if card draw would work. I don't know if land destruction would work. Card draw would probably work within very limited cases, like no card draw would be more than a single card at a time.
Yeah, you have to clamp way down on card draw.
So you're saying Brain Geyser becomes good?
Probably.
I mean, I feel like Brain Geyser would probably be god tier in this environment.
You still need the resources to play those cards.
Yeah, I think
But
really
you have more options.
I think really big nukes would sort of die out because you wouldn't have anything to fuel them. You'd see stuff like Fireball being twice whatever X is. Any lands that generated more than one color would go insanely through the roof in value, but you'd need fewer of them.
Yeah.
So that would probably even out.
I think it would be interesting to build that type of environment with the caveat that you couldn't have more than one of any card to limit the power of combo.
I mean, a big part of the reason that I really like Commander is because of how it's structured, it really plays against the ability to set up like specific I win the game combos.
I mostly agree.
You still can because it's Magic.
Well, I think the difference is you
Also,
can't just have a one-trick deck.
Right.
You've got to have a lot of different
You need to have like
win
at least
conditions.
3 versions of that trick in your deck.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of like a 4X game at that point. I could have a military victory. I could have a diplomatic victory. I could, do something else to get a victory condition.
But yeah, you end up with decks that just like do a bunch of things. But I like that because I don't feel like I have to have encyclopedic knowledge of what my opponents might be playing in order to play.
Basically can't, because they could be playing anything from the entire Magic, and they have probably 60 different card names in their deck, at least.
Yeah, and I like that because it makes that impossible, at least for any kind of reasonable play.
So you have a lot of decks that have a general theme, but not necessarily focused on a single combo.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas
if I pull up my Gorklaw deck, it's going to have a bunch of big green creatures in it.
Yeah, like you kind of know what's going on there, but kinda. You don't know exactly what's going on there. And honestly, neither do you as the person playing it, because you don't necessarily know what portion of the deck you're going to see in any given game, because it's probably not the whole thing.
Unless you have an absurd amount of card draw, you're going to see maybe like a third of your commander deck during the course of a game.
Yeah.
But if you have that much card draw, like you run the risk of decking out.
I've definitely had this problem.
I think you're the only person who's built a deck that has this problem. But yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I will never draft. Like, just never. I don't ever want to spend the time to know a set so well that I can draft even remotely competently.
So I'll be honest, like the only reason why I draft in Magic Arena is it is a far more efficient way of getting cards.
I mean, that's probably fair.
Like, I mean, even if I lose 3 in a row, I will walk away with way more cards and more directed cards that I might be interested in for other deck building than if I were to just open packs. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for me personally. And sometimes I shock myself and build a functional deck, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting to draft like a totally blind set. Like nobody who's playing in this draft knows what cards are in these packs. Let's do this.
So I will say one of the nice things about drafting in Magic Arena is you're not drafting against other players. You're drafting against the computer. So you're not actually playing against people that got the things in your draft.
Yeah, which that probably reduces the stress of it.
Okay, at this point, I don't know. Do we have time for another topic? Probably a short one. I'm going to throw this one out there because I don't have a lot of information on it. There's apparently a group working on a Destiny pen and paper game.
Is this 1996?
Seriously, licensed property pen and paper games. Is it West End Games?
I don't know. Like, I just saw a blurb that someone is working on as they described it, a D&D style game for Destiny.
That was mostly a joke because West End were the guys that did the Star Wars D6, the Indiana Jones game, the Ghostbusters game, the Men in Black game, which I have a copy of.
Why do you have a copy of that, Thalen?
Because I liked the movie and I saw it at Hastings. very quickly discovered that player access to neuralizers can break a lot of stuff.
There's been a lot of games that I've bought just because I wanted to read the lore that was contained therein. Like, I never had any intent of playing the D20 EverQuest game, but I bought them all, like, because nostalgia and tons of lore inside of them. Same for the most part with the early Warcraft pen and paper stuff. So I don't know if this factors into it, but they ended up hiring one of the community lore gurus, for lack of a better term, that is writing a paper book that deep dives into the lore of Destiny.
I think I saw something about that.
So I don't know if this is an official initiative for a pen and paper game, but it would be interesting if, like, the lore team that they've assembled is actually working on it.
This looks quite unofficial. Oh, this is not official. It's a fan-made thing that with Discord and everything. However, tabletop RPGs are definitely seeing a bit of a resurgence thanks to all the Critical Role stuff.
Yeah,
and the increased popularity of D&D at the moment.
It's true.
I'm shocked that you can buy D&D at Target. I that just floors me.
Times have changed.
Like, to come from an era when I had to hide my friends' dice so their parents wouldn't see them, to Target has D&D. I mean, it's a weird world we live in.
And it's gonna be even weirder when you realize why. Like, where
because
all of that's
Hasbro,
coming from.
Because Hasbro owns these properties?
It's partly that, but you know when the marketing uptick swapped was when like, it didn't make a lot of splash other than haha that's so funny in nerd circles, but pretty much everywhere else it was a really big deal to have Vin Diesel and several NFL players talk about how they play D&D and love it, like, just casually in interviews. The 3 weeks following, I forget what interview, was Vin Diesel, like, for one of the XXX movies.
It was third edition era, though, if I remember correctly, because, like, Matthew Lillard, or however you pronounce his last name, also came out around that same time talking about his D&D Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was towards the tail end of the Scream movie viability.
But in the last like 5 to 10 years, there've been a whole bunch of like celebrities talking about them playing D&D, and now we've got stuff like Critical Role, which would never have existed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But like, now it's like, oh well, NFL players play it, action movie heroes play it. I was talking with somebody recently who was like, I was talking with somebody recently in the game store, and she was like, I don't know, in her 60s maybe. She was like, I remember lots of nasty stuff said about these books back in the day, and I always avoided them, but I'm going to get some for my grandson because I forget, I don't even remember which football player it was, but he was talking about it. It can't be all that bad. Wow, okay. That's a weird effect.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, to live in the world right now as compared to the world I grew up in, and its treatment of things like that. I mean, shit, it floors me every time I go to Target or Walmart and look at Magic stuff. Just the fact that that's available in a normal store. I mean, everything that I bought back in the day was, I had to track down through some hole in the wall place. And quite honestly, like, where we're at right now is we need more environments like the Mox, because quite frankly, most game stores are shady situations still.
Mm-hmm.
I really wonder if that's kind of the next step, is game clubs, like gyms, but you pay because it's like you need to support the business model somehow.
Yeah.
But like membership organizations are kind of a big deal at the moment. Your CrossFit gyms, a jillion different kinds of gyms.
So it's a country club, but instead of playing golf, you play D&D.
Basically,
I'm down
I am
for
down
this.
with this. Yeah.
like,
Hey, damn, isn't there one of those across the street from you now?
I mean, no, you don't play D&D in this one. This is like I don't have words for this place.
There's we've got
I
one
do, but they're
opening up
impolite.
downtown that's a board game cafe, but it's not really a store. It's come play a game from our, list of games that we have on tap.
And I think that's what what these spaces become. Because I don't think I know that the like traditional model is this is a store and also you can play here, but that model can't compete. Like, that's not a competitive model, because you're basically talking about a brick and mortar store, and like there's so much gaming product that it's basically impossible for you to keep up, even if you had infinite store space. But if you had a place with like nice tables and it was comfortable and clean and you could get snacks and drinks, it was a quiet environment, a place that you could a place that you could, much like you could drop the kids off at the arcade, you could drop the kids off here and play games.
And I think the hardest part about that is you can build the space, you can stock the fridge, you can do all these things, but you have to reach some critical mass to build a community that gets people coming into it.
Yeah.
Because like something doesn't work like that unless you have friendly, non-elitist people that are willing to sit down and play games with newcomers.
Yeah, and I think that's why your staff needs to not be game store staff for the most part, because it's not about you don't need staff who play games necessarily. You need community managers. And maybe you have you have staff members who are like, game teaching experts, and that's their job, is to teach people new games or like suggest a game or play a game with people or whatever. Kind of like personal trainers, but for games. Or whatever those people in country clubs who help you work on your strokes are called. Probably also trainers. But like I think that could be an interesting space.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you'd still need to sell some things there, but instead of focusing on the games themselves, it would be like the accessories, like, oh, I need a card box, or I need a binder, or, I need some new dice, or I want some nice, pretty dice.
Yeah,
like when you go to the country club and you need some golf balls.
Yeah.
Or a towel.
Yep.
A golf bag. Yeah.
And they could probably order your favorite game stuff in for you, just like any other shop, but...
Yeah, but the problem with that is it's always going to be that this place is uncompetitive at all in the pricing, and that seems to just get worse. Like, Wizards of the Coast has changed a lot of the Magic pricing recently, and if you are able to buy product at the highest volume discount, the change isn't that big. However, if you're the mom and pop, your price just went up significantly per box.
Yeah, but that's why you don't worry about... the business case here is not running it like a store that sells games.
Like, there's a
that
comic shop.
Secondary.
That's totally secondary.
There's a comic shop that opened in the Box Yard downtown, which is like a structure built out of shipping containers. And, it's a cool place because he'll do like pull boxes and things like that. So you can keep, a subscription there. And for that, it's a perfectly reasonable experience. However, he's got this one sad box of Hour of Devastation Magic cards that maybe has one pack bought out of it. And I keep thinking to myself, no one will ever come in here and buy cards because you have nothing else gaming related. So he's basically just going to have to eat the cost of that at some point.
Yeah, there was a while when comic book stores selling Magic cards was viable, but it's really not anymore.
It would be a really interesting, you could do some really interesting stuff where your membership your membership pays for guest DMs to come in.
And I think the other thing that you would need to do is exploit technology significantly to where you had a site and maybe a mobile app associated with it, to where you can say, I'm going to be here at this time. I'm looking for a game. And then other people could see, oh, well, there's a game going to be happening here, so let's change our plans a little bit to where we arrive there an hour earlier instead of, when we were normally going to be there.
Yeah. And if you get big enough, you can make that a nationalized app where it's like, oh, I'm going to a new city. I'd like to get a game in. Can I drop by this place and see what people are playing?
Well, and something like that would also be a good place for the sorts of gaming accessories that are really difficult to justify getting yourself unless you just have far more money than sense, like the really super fancy gaming tables and projector systems and all sorts of stuff like that can make and miniatures and landscaping and all of that, like all the stuff that really adds up cost wise, and like unless you're just really really super serious into it, it's hard to justify getting into the good stuff. But if something like that could have this stuff available for use at a small fee based on how long you use it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, because I know I would love to be able to like use a full set of like the fancy Dwarven Forge dungeon miniature things for my game, but I can't justify spending the money on those.
Yeah, I mean, you as an individual can't spend the $500 it would take to put together a board like that, but for a store where you've got 100 people paying you monthly, like, yeah, that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, and you rent a room, and they even go set the stuff up in the room for you to your specs, and you just come in with your friends and play a game.
You know what I'm actually picturing here as a model for this is karaoke places.
Yeah.
Like the way karaoke is, when you're in Japan, they have the individual rooms with all the equipment and the machinery and everything. They serve food, they serve drinks, and
you pay by the
hour. By the hour. Yeah.
Or you have a membership to them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that would be really cool. I would go there.
I know they also have cosplay studios that are similar to where like there's just backdrops and pieces and things that you can go in there for a specific photo shoot in a specific room, and you pay by the hour while you're in there.
But yeah,
okay, someone listening to this, make that happen around the country. Okay, thanks.
Let me do it. You want to start a business?
We should start a business. Because it would be really cool. Because like I think the biggest problem that gaming has right now is the places that you can go for games are still these dark, dingy holes in the wall run by the Simpsons comic book guy.
Most of the time, yeah.
And they're
either
not
playing at someone's house or somewhere like that.
And it creates an inclusivity problem because people don't feel welcome there. And you can create a space that's intentionally made to make people feel welcome by staffing it with people whose job it is to make people feel welcome.
Right.
Hell, you could even, have some people who, on staff who their services as a game master are available for, whatever fee. So people who are new to the game that want to play can have like, a game run by an experienced game master who, is good at dealing with new players.
Yeah, like, hey, we want to do a one-shot. And if you have, part of what I was thinking was that it'd be very, very hard to keep a staff for something like that, just because you're going to have a certain amount of turnover and so on and so forth. But, if you have a particular membership, person on staff with a person, like a member who's particularly good, they could offer to do things in exchange for hey, we'll comp you a month of membership if you run a game for these people because we know you're good. Obviously there'd have to be a lot of pieces to make that make any sense, but
some sort of vetting and so forth. So you want to make sure it's only going to be the good DMs.
I think the other issue that you run into is the fact that a lot of these things just take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the big problems that I've seen with this board game cafe that's opening downtown is you look at the things that are on tap that you can play, and they have an average runtime on most of them, and it is significantly longer than a lunch break. So, I mean, that's kind of a problem that I have with that type of setup as it is right now, because like when I would get the most use out of it is I'm going to go eat a meal at this place and play a game while I'm doing it. And again, that's a different environment than what we've just been talking about, but like the time it takes to finish one of these things can be a factor, especially when it comes to booking.
Yeah.
And you've got a game that could, take an hour to play, or it could go 3 or 4 hours if things go a specific way.
I mean, I think that's why you pay by the hour. Because, like, karaoke places don't, or at least the ones that I've been to, like, if there's a room free, you get the room.
Yeah.
So they don't
go as
do
long as you
time
want.
slots.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think maybe some do, but yeah, my experience has been you pay for the amount of time that you want. And if that time runs out and you want to keep going, you just go pay some more. Pay for another hour.
Yeah. Oh, hey, this game's going great. Pay for another hour. Paying per time per room is probably a good call.
So another factor that could be thrown in here, though, is maybe give people a discount if they're open to drop-ins.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you could monetize it.
I mean, my thinking would be a couple of rooms that are the reserved rooms that you do have to reserve ahead of time. The majority of the rooms be like we've talked about, where you just pay by the hour, and then like a public space where you can basically just interact. You have a game that people are welcome to come over and drop in or whatever.
What a weird tangent we just got off on.
It's a thing.
Okay, we should probably actually wrap things up.
A
little bit.
Anyway,
Yep.
Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and if you want to make a thing like the thing we just described, that'd be kind of awesome.
Yes,
Let us know.
Please.
I'll be a member.
Yeah.
That membership fee.
Anyway, we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
See you.